Everyone, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions and welcome back to the Kansas Deep Dive. And we've got a returning guest. He's been on the show before. He did the first, I believe, couple of first few of our deep dive episodes. And of course, he's the man behind the forward in this book, Let It Be Your Guide, the Kansas album review. He's also the man behind the excellent Fates Warning biography, Destination Onward. And I understand just about to put the finishing touches on another book. From Radical Research, from Inside Out Records, Mr. Jeff Wagner. Hello, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This is always love talking to you, man.
And this one is, I know this is a very special Kansas album for you, not just as a fan, but you were pretty hands on with, you know, a lot that went on behind the marketing and everything to do with 2016's Prelude Implicit, the first new Kansas studio album. It's 16 long years.
Yeah.
I know that as a fan, I was thrilled beyond belief when I heard that they were recording again, and the album did not disappoint. But I didn't know you back then. But if I had, I definitely would have had you on to review it. I know we've talked about this many times, but how did you come to work with the band at this particular time in their career?
Well, I happened to be at Inside Out. I had been there already a couple years, and that's the issuing label, the label that signed Kansas in this new era. And Thomas Weber is a huge fan. He's the guy that is basically Inside Out. He started it. He still runs it. He still oversees it. He knew I was a huge fan. He had a couple other people on staff or around him at Century Media that were pretty primed for Kansas to be on the label. It actually happened. We made it work. And that's how. And so it was, in a way, it was just part of my job. It was one of many records that I would deal with on an annual basis. But this one felt special from the get-go because one, we're Inside Out, the people that run it, they're fans of everything they do. I'd say it's still a fan-run label. But also we were pretty excited about the new lineup. And in fact, I was sent to Rock Hill, South Carolina to see the new lineup. Maybe about 9-10 months or maybe a year after Ronnie had joined, and they were kind of working around the country and introducing that lineup. And it was right before Zach Rizvi was part of the lineup as well. But my report back to Thomas was, dude, they're incredible live too. So keep moving on this. Try to sign them. That actually happened, and yeah, it was just it was really, really a relief in a way when we started to get the demos for the album or hear parts of the finished album, how great it was. We were blown away. I mean, we were kind of beside ourselves. Like this, we expected it to be good, but not this good. And I've been listening to the album ever since it came out now. I mean, I'm a fan too. And in my last listen, kind of getting ready for this show, I know the album well, but it just reminded myself, I reminded myself, like, man, this really is a great album. I still love it to this day. I can get really excited about it. And I'm not at Inside Out anymore. So it's just as a fan, I think they turned in something most bands of their age don't.
Yeah, that's always the fear is a funny word, but when you're into a band and they haven't been regularly putting out music, or even if they have, there's always that, man, what if I really don't like it? What if it doesn't measure up? What if it's just, I don't know. Also, this is a lineup. This is, a revamped lineup, quite a new lineup.
Yeah.
Some familiar faces, but you never know how people are going to gel in the studio. And I just remember getting this and putting it in. And as soon as With This Heart comes on, well, the first thing, it's an odd time signature,
Yeah.
but I'm still bobbing my head with it.
Right.
And then Ronnie starts singing, and I'm like, this is going to be all right. I just knew.
Yeah.
And to me, the album just went from strength to strength, and it just every song on it was like that. Yeah, like that one, like that one, like that one. And as you get older, and the bands you love get older, you start to set little guidelines for yourself. You're like, okay, well, that's three good ones. That's five good ones. That's okay. I can brag it up if there's really five really good ones. But when you like it all, that's when you want the world to find out about it.
Yep.
And that's when you want and that's the shame of it is that so many of these bands, they put out new music and it's forgotten. And I've told so many people in the course of doing this deep dive series and promoting the book, their last two albums are as strong as anything they've done.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
don't, there's no law that says a veteran bunch of players can't put together exciting, vibrant new music. Yeah, I've still got when I got the CD, I've still got this souvenir
Oh yeah.
souvenir
Yeah.
pass
I
that came
remember
with it. It
taking
says,
care of that. Yeah. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
pass does not award entrance to any Kansas show. All right, fine.
Yeah, that was
Um,
a thing. Yeah, we were like, we got to put in something extra. What's cool? Well, those are cool, but oh, what if a fan shows up and tries to get backstage? Well, we can't have that, so we had to have that little disclaimer. But hey, I mean, it is what it is.
yeah. And I also had the privilege of talking to Denise de la Cerda about her artwork
Yep.
for this
Yep.
album and the two live albums and the next one and
Yep.
the lovely 50th anniversary poster. But um, I mean, that's another thing that Kansas has this history of great music, but also more often than not, fantastic cover art.
Sure.
And
Sure.
yeah, I mean, this one just looks, it's classy and it just looks like Kansas.
I,
So
I like in your sorry, I like in your book how much talk there is about the logo. Like I don't think I've read a book about a band where there was so much logo talk. And
I
I love
think,
that because they morph that logo. And then sometimes you're like, well, why didn't they use the logo? Because there's only about 4 or 5 where they didn't.
and
But it's
boy, does
such a
it ever
great,
stick out when they don't.
yeah, yeah, it's such a great logo. But yeah, they have the whole package. They're one of those bands that like every element has to be in place,
Yeah.
and Phil Ehart, has to be credited for seeing all that through, Rich Williams, of course, too. And even the newer guys, but it's really Phil that's like driving that, like we have to have total focus and make sure that we're happy with every single aspect of the project. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it's one of my favorite logos because I love the design of it. I love the way the letters are constructed, but it's also very adaptable. You can color it anything.
Yep.
It works in any color.
Yep.
With Monolith, you get the feathers in it, and
Right.
I just love how they've used it over the years. And I think that anytime they haven't used it, those aren't my favorite album covers. So
Yeah.
uh, it just kind of goes along with it. So we'll
Yep.
get into the tracks. So yeah, opening track, With This Heart. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I've always loved it. To me, I think it was the first one I heard too, because I think I started hearing these when Thomas played it for me when we were with the band in New York doing some advanced stuff on the album, and we met some of the guys. Went to the record distributor there in New York. I remember him playing me some of it in the car, and just being blown away. And he just threw on With His Heart, and then he threw on Visibility Zero, and it's like, damn. And With This Heart, not only is it a great number for an opening an album, but it really marries, like you said, you already mentioned that odd time signature, but also along with that catchiness that they had, like say, well, they always had it, but certainly it peaked in like the early 80s, with things like Vinyl Confessions and Audio Visions. And to me, that's kind of the world that song lives in
Yeah,
their
yeah,
evolution. And I just think it's outstanding. I think Ronnie just sounds so inspired. I think it's just bristling with a kind of energy um, that is so memorable. And I was really kind of bummed out they didn't play it live more. And in fact, I don't know that they ever played it live. I always when I first heard it, when we started getting into the album and understanding what the album is, like I thought, well, that's an obvious single, that's an obvious video, that's an obvious live song, but it never really materialized for whatever reasons. But I'm telling you, I think that's a really underrated track, quite honestly.
I,
Yeah.
I think that it could have made a great, for them putting out the new album. I think it could have made a great opener. I can just picture the lights turning on, like dun 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 dun, 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 like and
Yeah.
then the band slowly yeah, they didn't
It's got
ask
all that
me.
drama that you like in Kansas.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
and then they could have gone right from that if they'd wanted into Paradox and something familiar, and you're
Yeah.
along for the ride, and you're like, hey, I like that new song too. But
Yep.
hey, um, and you already mentioned Visibility Zero. I mean, the lyrics on this album are really, really good and really, really
Yep.
besides the music being really good, but Visibility Zero, I just think there's just such smart, um, say turns of phrase, but that's I'm pretty sure, but that's the one that says how we fail to see what's right before our eyes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's also, you could link it to 2016, but you could link it to any time.
It's funny because this Kansas could at any juncture in their career, especially the later career, try to ape exactly what they did in the 70s. I think they have the capability to do it. I think they have the songwriting to do it, but they're never going to let themselves do it. They are always a band that, that they have that motto, Kansas is a band. Well, that means they're a band writing for now. They're a band writing about things that are on their mind now. They're a band writing music that's contemporary and interesting to them now. But I think Visibility Zero certainly has a late 70s Kansas vibe. Could have been on Monolith, could have probably been on Point of No Return. It's that strong, and I just think it has that vibe. I think it really does capture that era of the band. So I don't think they're obviously aping any era, but that's the feel I get when I listen to Visibility.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a conscious thing, because those usually fail miserably, or
Sure.
just shades of it because it's in your DNA, it's in your playing DNA.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
example, like you already talked about Audio Visions, the Unsung Heroes, when that comes on, I get Hold On vibes. But
Okay.
it's very much its own song, but it's kind of in waltz time. I think it's in 6/8,
Yeah.
which it's got a violin melody. But man, when I think about, you know, uh COVID and the time period in which Absence of Presence came out, the Unsung Heroes could just as easily have come out then, and everybody would have thought it was about first responders, or
Sure.
you know. So again, it's that timeless aspect of it, and really heartfelt. It never comes off as trite or sort of cloying. It always comes out as from the heart. And what I like about Ronnie's vocals is that he doesn't sound like Steve Walsh. He doesn't sound like John Elephant. He sounds like his own guy, but he's got the right tone. He's got the right register for
Yeah.
singing Kansas material.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I,
It's like he was born for it.
yeah, and the fact that he can sing anything from their catalog, he can sing anything from uh, People of the South Wind to Taking in the View. Like he just this it's fantastic what this band can do now, because it's like they're not scared of any part of their history, and the new history they're creating. I mean, this album's 8 years old now, which is
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
crazy, because I can still remember um, doing the review episode for this, and I was so into it. If I'm not mistaken, when this came out, I think it hit 41 on Billboard.
It
Like it
got
did
pretty
pretty.
high. I don't
It,
remember it exactly, but I, of course, remember everybody being really happy. In fact, Phil sent us all an email saying, "Hey guys, these are great numbers. We didn't expect this." And those guys know that the temperature out there. They know things are different than in their heyday. But this was, I think, a success for everybody concerned. And getting that, I saved that email. I was like, I'm so proud
yeah,
to that as long as Phil's happy, then Kansas is happy. If Rich is
yeah,
happy, Kansas is happy. We're happy. But Visibility Zero, I'm sorry, Unsung Heroes. You make good points. I want to mention that to me, Ragsdale is a huge part of that song. David Mannion, who was briefly their keyboardist, does great work all over this album. I think he's really good throughout this song. He makes his signature known. And then Platt, you mentioned Ronnie Platt, sings his ass off on this. I think he's
yeah,
incredible on this song, as he is throughout the album. But what we have there is like two really new guys, and then Ragsdale, who's newish, I mean, he's been
yeah,
around since the mid 90s for them, but like, you have those guys taking the spotlight. So it's not like Rich and Phil are too concerned about their egos. They understand what this band needs. And if it means that Mannion and Platt are going to be the focus of a song, well, then they are, and I think that speaks a lot to how unified they like to be with their membership. And they had such a strong membership, because I don't know if you saw them in this era live, but they were incredible. And you could tell, like, ooh, this is about as on fire as Kansas has been in a long time live. And
yeah,
the last thing I wanted to mention here is that, a lot of people talk about, oh, it's not Kansas if it's not Steve Walsh. Well, you wouldn't have this album if Steve Walsh had stayed in the band. He didn't want to write new material. He didn't want to sing certain songs or certain eras, and Platt, being such a big fan, will do anything. He's like,
yeah,
yeah, I still have deep tracks I want to try live and hope we can do, and he knows their catalog. And I think it's to be celebrated that they release such a genuine Kansas album. It has the essence of Kansas all over it. You wouldn't have that with Steve Walsh. All due respect to Steve Walsh, of
Yeah,
course.
I mean,
I mean, of
I
course,
tried to. I
yeah.
hope I made that clear in the book.
Oh yeah,
Full
oh yeah,
full
you did.
respect to
Yeah,
Steve Walsh,
yeah,
but I had resigned myself to the fact that we weren't going to have any new Kansas music, and that was a shame.
yeah.
And you know, if he'd have stepped down sooner, we may have had 5 or 6 more albums with Ronnie on vocal. It didn't work out that way, but I'm just saying, give us more new music, not less.
Sure. Yeah, of
That
course.
and also the fact that yeah, I think that Phil and Richard, their egos are in check enough to know that we hired these guys to be part of the band. Show us what you can do,
Hmm.
and it's all over this album. And I mean, really, in some ways, Zach kind of assumed the Kerry Livgren role of
He totally did.
multi instrumentalist and writing the bulk of the music, and
Yep.
that's a pretty tall order for a new guy stepping into a legacy band where you've got longtime fans sitting back and like, okay, impress me. So
He's a big find for them. Yeah, we keep talking
yeah,
about all these new guys, but he's a huge part of why they work.
yeah,
Why this album, excuse me, in absence works so well. It's a lot on Zach's shoulders. Yeah, he's the big hero here.
yeah, and it's well produced. Like it sounds really really good, and the fact that well, you've got Zach, Phil, and Richard producing, but the fact that Jeff Blixman is in on the mixing, I think that has a lot to do with. Was it sort of like Blixman passing the torch to Zach, saying, "You know what to do with this band. You know how they need to sound."
Well, in a way, I mean, Zach was an assistant to Glixman before
Oh,
he
he
joined.
was okay,
So that's kind of how they got into the fold. And like, I think there was some, obviously some Native Window, if you know that band.
right?
I think there was some connection there, certainly. But like, yeah, it was just through Glixman that Kansas became acquainted with Zach and vice versa. And Zach was just every bit a Kansas fan as any of us. And just kind of got to work his way in. And first, I think he started just off as a writer,
Yeah,
outside writer, and he was too good to just be a writer, so eventually joined the band. But yeah, so yeah, certainly Glixman's part of that whole chain and that whole chain of events. Yeah,
yeah. It's just sonically, it's a really good sounding album. It's
yep,
not pinned. It's
no,
not. It's not brick walled. Certainly, it's
no,
just it breathes. It's really both the new albums sound really good. Rhythm in the Spirit was a single, I believe, was it not?
yep, and a video.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So this is one that they did play live.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. They
Yeah.
were they were all about this song, and so was Thomas at Inside Out. And it's funny because I never really loved it. This is the only song in the album that I just felt like it's good. It's got I'm not scared of modernisms in older rock bands or newer bands, not at all. But it just has a vibe to me that's more like, well, we mentioned Native Window. I feel like it's more of a Native Window type song. It just has a difference to it that I'm not catching. I like parts of it. There's a bridge there. The answers are hard to find in the mind that lives confined. That I love that. I think that's a brilliant bridge. It gives me shivers when I listen to it. Don't love the rest of the song, but I'm completely, and I think I said this in your book, I'm totally in the minority there. I know fans
Yeah,
love
I
it.
think
When
it's
they played it
great, but
live, people go
but
crazy as if it was an
yeah,
old classic.
yeah.
Um, and same with the band. They all loved it. Same with everybody else at the label. Excuse my cat. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's no problem. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I guess I'm an outlier there. And it's just, who knows why this song doesn't.
It's funny, like when something that just isn't hitting you and it seems to be hitting everyone around you, you just like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have our different expectations and tastes, right?
And then Refugee, which is a really nice acoustic. I mean, Kansas acoustic, it's a long history, but this is a really, really nice one. Again, it's that heartfelt thing. Now, was this song inspired by anything in particular, or was it just a storytelling thing?
I think it's about the what's it? I'm blanking on such a serious and horrible subject. Um, Human trafficking.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
When it came out, and I think because of the title, a lot of people thought it was about like boat refugees and things like this, and Kansas is often spoken about, native or minority cultures or whatever, and this
Right.
and you think it would be about that. No, it's actually about. I think I talked to Ronnie once about it, and it was about human trafficking and the bleakness of that. And there's, so it's appropriately melancholic. I think it's
Yeah,
such a melancholy song, and I
it
love
is.
melancholy. That's one of the things I like so much about a lot of the music I listen to is just that deep sadness works for me in music, and this refugee has that. It's befitting of the subject and the title. Ronnie's delivery gives me chills. The whole thing gives me chills. The violin, and they played it on this tour cycle. So
Yeah, it's on the second, it's on the Point of No Return and Be Live and Beyond.
yeah,
Yeah, in the
that's
acoustic set, and it just fits right in.
yeah. I love this song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorites, and I'll be honest, it fooled me, the title, The Voyage of 818,
Yeah.
because I'm like, okay, they write about historical stuff, they wrote about Einstein and Howard Hughes. What's this about? Well, it's 8 minutes and 18 seconds long. And you mentioned there's some other sort of coincidences as well, right?
Yeah. I mentioned that New York trip that Thomas from Inside Out and myself took. We met and stayed with the band for a couple days in New York at God, what was the hotel? Damn it, doesn't matter. We had a lot of fun. But before the album was out, I didn't know there was a song called Voyage of 818 on it. I think Thomas had heard it. He might have known the title, but Phil comes down the next morning after the night after we had all checked in and done our thing. And he says, "You guys aren't going to believe my room number." They were like, "What?" "It's 818." Like, oh, how that's perfect, and everybody was like pretty psyched about that. And then at that breakfast, I learned why that was significant because they had this title for this, what ended up being this epic song.
Yeah.
And I told everybody at the table, I'm like, that's so weird because I live, my address is 818. So there's, just kind of a lot of
Yeah.
coincidences there, but that's kind of nice. And man, it's all about this majestic, epic piece of music, man. Such a
It's
great, the ultimate Kansas classic right
I
there.
was gonna say it's very classic Kansas sounding. Yeah. It just it when I hear a really good new album from a band that I've loved for decades, it's kind of like hearing from an old friend. It's the warm fuzzies, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just bathing in nostalgia. I'm like, I can't believe I'm enjoying this. I haven't heard it 100 times yet, but I probably will because I'm going to listen to this over and over again. Yeah, this was one that really stood out to me.
Nice.
Camouflage is interesting because I find it's very similar lyrically to Visibility Zero, but I like the fact that like whereas Visibility Zero doesn't actually say those words, it says like a synonym of it, how we fail to see what's right before our eyes. And in Camouflage, it talks about when your cover's blown.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that one?
I don't think I ever learned. Yeah, I don't really know. I know some of the song stories here from talking to the guys and helping with publicity and marketing, but yeah, I don't really know. I think it's one of those that they like to keep kind of behind the veil. Like we're not going to tell you exactly what it's about. Um, Let the listener decide, sort of thing.
Camouflaged,
Maybe,
just like
maybe
they
something
said.
deeper. I don't know. I'll tell you
Yeah,
this: it's the second longest song in the album. It comes after the longest song. To me, and this is the point in the album where it becomes like true prog Kansas. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's challenging. It's a killer tune. There's a foreboding kind of darkness to it that I really like. And they always had that. I mean, Death of
yeah,
Mother Nature Suite, from their first album had that. And
yeah.
they would always introduce that just about every album. Again, I think Platt and Ragsdale are awesome on this. I think this is one of those songs too where Phil Ehart's drumming is so tasty, but just subtle and stealthy as hell. Like
Yeah.
he's not a big showboater, but man, if you just hone in on any given track, he's really good. I think Camouflage is some of his best drumming on the album, and it's like you only catch that from knowing, like, having listened to the album a lot. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's not going to come at you right away and go, this is one of Phil Ehart's greatest hits. But I just love him as a drummer because of his stealth. He's powerful, he's monstrous, and he's completely underrated.
I've always said that none of the guys in this band ever got their props as individual musicians. And Phil has always been one of those drummers that he's got the chops,
Yep.
and sometimes he lets loose a little bit.
Yep.
But for the most part, he's playing for the song, but he's always playing exactly the right thing, just what you want to hear, even if you don't know you want to hear it yet. He just understands what a song needs.
Good point. Really good point. I think the same of Rich Williams in the sense that like
Yep.
kids for decades should have been learning his lead licks because when he breaks into a lead, they're face melting. I mean, he's a face melter. He's got that big BC Rich tone, or he used to use a BC Rich. I think he's playing other stuff now. But God, the guy's a monster, and
Yeah.
he's just really not talked about it like that. I think people were under the mistaken impression that Kerry Livgren was, took all the leads. No, 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 no.
Yeah. Watch some of the old live clips. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty much evened out. And some of the really melodic ones, those are rich.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now
Yeah.
he's got such a light, wonderful touch, but like I said, he can just melt your face if he wants to.
Yeah.
It's what I love about him as a player too. He's just got that range.
I think that he and Phil both like strike me as like they're sort of like I don't say humble geniuses, but it's like they're so confident in their abilities that they don't feel the need to show off every time that the spotlight shines on them. And what
Absolutely.
makes Kansas music work, no matter what lineup it is that everybody always seemed to know their place. Like, I go back to Dave Hope as a bass player on you listen to those old albums.
Yeah.
He never gets talked about in the pantheon of great bass players, but he always plays the right thing. He never gets in the way of the violin or the guitar, but when it's a quieter moment, he throws in these bass lines that without which you wouldn't have the song would not be the same.
Sure.
And speaking of bass players, I mean, one of probably the next senior guy down in the band from Rich and Phil is Billy Greer.
For sure.
And Billy is also a great vocalist. So I'm really glad they gave him a vocal on here with Summer, which is just to me is I don't want to say it's a more traditional classic rock song, but that's kind of what it is. It's a good shuffle, and I think it's one of my favorites too.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It comes in the middle of, I'll call it side two, just for vinyl listeners, but like side two is pretty dark and pretty brooding and pretty,
Yeah.
contemplative. But then Summer kind of adds levity to that. It's just upbeat. It feels really great. It's got incredible momentum, and Billy Greer's voice on it to me is very inspired. And his voice and this song to me, that just gives another layer of depth to the album. Great albums should have
It,
depth and
it's
different.
well paced. It's well sequenced because
Yeah.
it's getting pretty deep. So
Yeah.
it lightens up for that, that light and shade. So it
Yeah.
gives us a little bit of that.
I can tell
And
you a little
next,
bit about Summer in terms of the lyric. I don't know if this is out there, and I hope it's not. I hope it's not one of those things that's not supposed to be. But it was basically inspired by Steve Walsh, and when he left the band, I'll never forget
Okay.
that summer. Because even though those guys will probably now tell you it was just a blessing in disguise that he parted, and they could kind of go and do
Quite
old
a
songs
quite a
and get
thing though. I
them out.
mean, there's the voice of Kansas, right?
Yeah, and this was the second time he left, and it hurt them, and so I know that part of this song arose out of the memory of that and um, the time that he left. So you can't really see that in the lyric like too
No, I never
literally,
would have guessed that.
but it has a connection to that. I know that.
And I mean, if it weren't for Steve brought Billy into the band when he came
Right.
back for
Sure, because
Power.
he was in the
So I
streets.
mean,
Yeah.
it owes a lot
Yeah.
to that guy.
Yep.
Wow. I think I like it even more now. And now we're kind of back into sort of Visibility Zero Camouflage territory lyrically with one of my favorites, Crowded Isolation.
Oh
Musically,
God.
this one is just prime Kansas.
When this album came out, it was my favorite on the album.
Yeah.
I just connected to Crowded Isolation. It's one of my favorites still. I don't know if I could pick a favorite now. But man, it's got such excellent drive. It has kind of a hypnotic roll to it.
Yeah.
Excellent keyboard work, excellent violin work. I mean, everything you want in Kansas.
Yeah.
It's right
And
there.
then the album proper ends with a very somber instrumental, Section 60. For some
Yeah.
reason, I'm sure they didn't plan it this way. There's 3 songs in this album with numbers in the title, but
Right. Right.
Section 60 actually does refer to something in particular. And I think I think it's in the liner notes, or maybe I just yeah, it's about Arlington National Cemetery, and
Yep.
um,
I think they
yeah, it's
visited, didn't they visit? I think they visited and
yeah,
made
they visited there, and it's the what does it say here? There's no national memorial for those that perished in these wars, only tombstones tended by family and friends. Final resting place for United States military personnel that gave all during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So um, it's quite a thing that and they toured it in 2011. So this was a long time coming. I wonder what came first, the music, and then they it reminded them of that visit, or I wonder if they said we need to write a piece of music that conveys
yeah,
this feeling.
I don't recall, but I would guess that from that just military snare work that kind of propels the song, um, it I wouldn't be surprised if they were just like, let's write about that experience or that our emotions about that, just because
Yeah,
it is so militaristic, you know.
yeah,
It's weird. I'm not gonna say weird. It's interesting that they played it on that tour. It just doesn't pop out at you as like, oh, it's a great live track, you know. I'd always be the one to say, oh, it should be With This Heart, not Section 60.
yeah.
But
But
they did it.
it also serves to give the singer a break.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah,
It also, but it works beautifully as an album closer too. I don't think it
yeah,
could go anywhere else in the album and make as much sense as it does here. Here, you're kind of going out on this emotional sort of, you know, non-vocal thing. It's contemplative, I think, in that way. It's gorgeous. It has a cinematic closing, so I think that's always something with an album too. You know, like it might be easy to sequence the stuff in the middle, but how do you start? How do you end?
at the end, yeah,
And
yeah.
this album definitely has top-notch opener and a top-notch closer for what it is. So yeah, it's kind of like credits are rolling as Section 60.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's almost like, what do they call it? Taps. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, it's
kind of like
tapsish.
that.
Yeah.
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 As far as I'm concerned, I mean, my opinion, that's the end of the album. There are two bonus tracks, which I've always been kind of like, okay. First one's Home on the Range, and for a guy my age that grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons, it always makes me think of Bugs Bunny. Like, it doesn't
Sure.
matter how sincerely it's delivered. When I hear Home on the Range,
Inescapable.
yeah, it's like,
Because
and
we're
I
about the
wanted to
same age,
stop at,
probably.
Deer
Yeah.
and the Antelope play and the rabbits. Like, I just
Right, right, right.
so it's an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Did they talk to you about either of the bonus tracks, the Home on the Range or the Oh Shenandoah?
Not really. I mean, they knew that they needed bonus tracks. You know,
Yeah.
you come out with an album after so long, you have different formats, and it's harder to sell physical music. So, what are we going to do? Well, they didn't have any originals that they were confident enough about. I don't think they really had any leftovers, really. So they decided to do these two, and they felt, you know, and I agree with them that they're completely in the Kansas spirit to do these kind of old,
Oh
you know,
yeah, they are. There's an old
royalty-free
timiness.
songs that are, you know,
Yeah.
in public domain. But really, you know, every move they make is serious. They're not just going to toss off anything. But I thought this and then the other bonus track were pretty good choices because it gets back to that heartland Americana aspect that they've always had, being originally from Kansas and just you know, they're pretty patriotic dudes, I guess you'd say. Why not? And I think it works. I was a little scared to hear this one, quite honestly. And I think it works. I don't listen to it every time I listen to the album either, like you
Yeah.
say. But it's nice to have. It's nice to have just in that little like
As far as I'm
in the
concerned, yeah,
closet.
after that long, give us more. Give us what you got.
Sure.
And yeah,
Sure.
and not every band could. They're about the only band I could think of that could do it
Yeah.
and 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 not have it come off jokey. And I
Sure.
don't think their version of it is. It's just that my
Right.
familiarity with that song is years and years of Somewhere Else, and you hear a very heartfelt rendition of it. It's like, okay. And but yeah, it fits. I mean, and in either one of the when I think of that, their approach to that, I picture that cover, the original band on the back of their first album cover, Home on the
Mm.
Range. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah. Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. That's a good call.
So that's Prelude Implicit, the long-awaited comeback album, and it I think it was the beginning of a rejuvenation for the band. I hope that rejuvenation continues.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and it's really cool that you had such a an insider's look, no pun intended, with Inside Out, but you had such an inside look at that, and
Yeah,
and
I mean,
boy,
it
but
was, yeah, it was a real honor, and I'm grateful for
yeah,
that experience. And we put out the Leftoverture Live thing, and I
great.
got to see them
Yeah,
live a ton during this
yeah,
era. And I mean, in Chicago and here on the East Coast, and just, man, on the cruise, on the Yes cruise, saw them a couple times. The couple shows they played on that. Got to know the guys. It led to other writing projects with them. I did the Absence of Presence art book, and the Another Fork in the
no
Road.
fork in the road.
I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
selected to choose the tracks. Like, I mean, I'm living the Kansas fans' dream.
Pretty much, yeah,
It,
and that's all in here.
yep.
Jeff talks about that in his intro to this book, and thank you again for helping me out with that, along with everybody that contributed. But
My honor,
um,
and I just want to point out your awesome spine to that book. I emailed you after I got the book. I said,
yeah, oh,
nice
that was very
Columbia
much by design. I knew there
cassette
was,
CD, red on white, right there.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
that's great.
impact red impact font on white. Anybody who's ever bought, well, just for a quick reference, I happen to have this out.
There you go.
It's
Yep.
the same thing, same feel.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
I always wanted to use that, and when this came around, I'm like, this will work, because Kansas we're on CBS. So
Yep.
um,
Yep.
so Jeff, thanks so much for sitting in with me again on this late arriving deep dive. We got a very very special one coming up. The very very special guest. That's all I'm going to say about it. I tell Jeff knows what I'm talking about. Jeff, what have you got going on now?
Well, you can still buy the Fates Warning book at fateswarningbook.com if I can get that plug in. Also, it's also at Amazon. I'm finishing a book on Voivod, which has always been one of my favorite metal bands, and one of my three favorite Canadian bands, up there with Rush and No Means No. But yeah, I'm just about rounding the corner on the layout, and I should be publicizing the title, the cover, sometime in October for real, and then taking pre-orders shortly thereafter that. And then other than that, I'm just doing my Radical Research podcast. It's you can find us at radicalresearchpodcast.org. And that's just a lot of fun, and it's pretty eclectic and left field in nature. And that's how I like it. So
Cool. Jeff Wagner, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, check out all of those. I'll have those links posted below. And thanks everybody for checking out this edition of the Kansas Deep Dive. We'll see y'all later
buy Tim's
on
book.
Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Thank you.